Well, good evening, everybody. It is Chris here. I am the interim CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project, and I am also a server and a cook, and just a regular Albertan with nothing better to do than try and improve things in this province. So today we're going to be showing a pre-recorded video that we did with Nadine Wellwood a couple days ago. Carrie and I did. The reason for that is because Nadine is in Calgary tonight doing a live in-person meeting about the Alberta Pension Plan. But we had this webinar scheduled about the pension plan, so we decided to do it in that way. So the way it's going to work tonight is we're going to show the recording of the video that we did with Nadine. And then at the end, I'm going to go through the questions and I will answer them as best I can. Throughout this process, I've become fairly knowledgeable about the Alberta Pension Plan. So it is very likely that I can answer your questions. If I can't, we'll make sure that we add them to our frequently asked questions on the Alberta Prosperity Project website. So speaking of the Alberta Prosperity Project, the Alberta Prosperity Project is a grassroots educational organization with the goal of educating Albertans as to the benefits and the merits of Alberta independence, or Alberta sovereignty, if you want to look at it that way. There are many reasons for this, and the biggest reason, and something that we've all experienced in the last few years, is we really saw some loss of our freedoms and certainly our prosperity. And it brought up a lot of questions. It shone a light on a lot of things that we really didn't pay too much attention to, but we're paying attention now. Now, from that intro video, you'll see, we're very aware that there is a global agenda influencing politics in this country and in this province. And one of the goals of the Alberta Prosperity Project is to make sure that people know what's going on, so that when it comes time to stand up and use their voices, or check the box at election time, or be involved in a constituency association or whatever, you know what to ask for. You know what we need to do. So if you want to support what we're doing, please become a member. If you can, donate to the cause. It has come to my attention that it is very possible now that we can issue you a tax receipt for your more sizable donations, either from a business or an individual. So we'll talk about that on another webinar in the near future. But just know for now that that is something that we will be able to do. If you go to the webpage, albertaprosperityproject.com, you can find all of the information about the project, as well as a portal to become a member, to donate, or to volunteer, all of which are extremely important when we consider what needs to be done in this province to make sure that people know what to ask for and what to do. So why the Alberta Pension Plan? Well, there are a few things that Alberta really must, I'm not going to say should, but we must do in order to stand up and say enough is enough to the federal government that has been really taking us on a path to, well, whatever the opposite of prosperity is where they want us to go. We see that in the news all the time. Like, we see the federal minister of the environment and climate change telling us that there's going to be no more funding for roads because they don't want us driving cars. You see attack after attack after attack on Alberta's resource and energy industry. And it's really very apparent that it is time that Alberta stands up. And there are a few things that we must do in order to do that. Our pension plan is one of those things. And it's not just because we overfund the pension plan by approximately $3 billion a year. It's not just because we've accumulated over 50% of the amount of the fund through our contributions, according to the calculations in the legislation. It's even more than that. What's happening around us is the federal government uses provinces like Alberta, who are net contributors to most things, to fund these attacks on the very things that make us prosperous. And it's turned out that other provinces, other people will go along with it because they benefit from the transfer of wealth from Alberta to the provinces. Well, if we want to stop this thing, if we want to get people to pay attention to what's going on, and we want to have a fair and equitable confederation, the first thing we have to do is we have to quit enabling the federal government to take this country on a path to destruction. The pension plan is the first step. And really, If you've been watching the news, you'll understand that it is very effective when Alberta stands up and says, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to stand on our own 2 feet because we are the adults in the room, and we're going to act like that. The federal government seems to lose their minds, as does the left, but they do that often. So without further ado, I'm going to start this video that we recorded with Nadine Wellwood a few days ago. And you'll notice that I am wearing the same shirt. And it's not to fool you. It's just for a little bit of continuity. But there is a change. My buttons aren't done up today, and they were done up the other day. So here we go, folks. Enjoy the show. Well, Nadine Wellwood, it's been a minute. How have you been?
I've been very good, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I hear you're pretty busy helping to educate Albertans about this Alberta pension plan that's all the buzz right now.
We are definitely trying to do that.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for it, as are many Albertans and the Alberta Prosperity Project, because that's one of our goals. We want to see Alberta prosperous and free, and the way to do that is by taking back as much sovereignty as we can and standing on our own 2 feet like the adults in the room that we are. So before we get going, can you just kind of let people know who you are, where you came from, and why you decided to get involved with this conversation about the Alberta pension plan?
Sure. So I'm no stranger to politics. Most of your audience probably know me from having run in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections with People's Party of Canada and Maxime Bernier. The reason for getting involved at that point was I really enjoyed the platform that Maxime had put forward. It was very principled and very rational in my mind, and addressed many of the issues that weren't necessarily obvious, the consequences of which we are seeing many today, including things around immigration. And then, of course, I did get involved, as you very well know, as we had a conversation with the UCP when Danielle won the leadership, and I ran for Livingston McLeod, and of course won the nomination down there, had the CA put my name forward as their MLA to be on the ballot. And of course the executive, which I think still strongly under the Jason Kenney influence, did see to it to make sure that that wasn't going to happen and disqualified my nomination. So it's a little bit of my political background, but for what many people don't know, I have owned an aerospace and defense company. I've been an entrepreneur for 30 some years. And most recently, I had a small independent investment firm here in Calgary, in Cochrane, which is where I reside. And I am a chartered investment manager by trade or profession. So when it comes to the Alberta pension plan, my political background and then, of course, my work professionalism and life have really kind of come together in a nice collision to talk about the Alberta pension plan, as I understand the inner workings of investments and trying to help people understand the questions that they actually need to ask and the relevant information as to comparing a Canada pension plan with an Alberta pension plan.
Well, on that note, why in the world would we need an Alberta pension plan? Isn't there a perfectly good Canada pension plan?
Well, it's interesting because the Canada pension plan has become a little bit of a sacred cow for many, which seems to be a little bit off limits. Don't touch my pension. Because people believe because they're receiving a paycheck, it actually works. That is a very shallow kind of scratch the surface analysis. And if you dig just even a little bit into the Canada pension plan, there are many issues and concerns that, in particular, Albertans, which are funding the primary, the bulk of the Canada pension plan, should be concerned about.
So what are some of these concerns? I mean, we just contribute to this pension plan. We put in a pile of money and then we get the money back out with interest at the end. Is that not how this is supposed to work?
I wish that was the case. So let's start with what the Canada pension plan actually is, because it's a pool of assets that taxpayers by force, right? It's a mandatory plan, have to contribute to. So not only do they have to contribute, but so do their employers. And it pretty much is a pay as you go system. So we have basically taxation, the pool of resources, and then you have a commitment of the workforce for today to pay the benefits of those people who are currently retired or retiring. And so it's not fully funded. It is truly a pay-as-you-go, and it is only propped up by the younger population, primarily here in Alberta, as we are the ones who contribute the most to the plan and probably are the ones in all honesty, exposed to the greatest risk by remaining with the Canada Pension Plan. So if you take a look at the Canada Pension Plan, one of the things that is not easy to find, nor is it easily disclosed, is the unfunded liabilities. And the unfunded liabilities as of December 31st, 2021 was $1.14 trillion. That had grown from 2019, where it was $884 billion. So you can see the trend.
Let me interrupt you there for a second. You said 1.14 trillion?
Yes.
As in 1,114 stacks of $1 billion?
Yes. If that's what it works out to, it's 1.14 trillion with a T.
That's a huge number. Where did you find that type of information? Because this is the first I've heard of that.
Yeah, if you go into the Chief Actuarial Report, the latest one that was done in 2021, I think it's report number 31, you'll find it hidden. It's one line is the only mention it gets, one line under acknowledgements. I believe it's on page 187.
Okay, and who does that report?
That's the Chief Actuarial Office. So this is the independent audit that's done to assess the sustainability of the Canada Pension Plan. It's done once every 3 years.
Okay, so is it like that information would be reliable? I mean, that's from the source and an unbiased external auditor?
Absolutely. This is based upon all the information provided to, it's an audit. So if it's not factual or accurate, then there's some hanky-panky going on in some sort of government organization, because all the information that's provided to the chief actuary is what's used. And that's Stats Canada, that's the CPPIB investment reports that are provided to them, which they do annual reports.
Okay, so to me, that sounds a little bit off-putting if I was going to be putting my money in any type of investment, although it doesn't sound like CPP is actually an investment, because if it were, you would put some money in, it would grow, and you take it out later, but that's not what happens. So what's the consequence of that 1.14 trillion in, what did you call it, unmanaged assets?
It's unfunded liabilities.
Unfunded liabilities, yeah.
Yeah. So what's even more interesting, in addition to that, before we get into that conversation, is the fact that in 2026, the contributions are actually not going to keep up with the expenditures. So as it's written, the expenditures will actually exceed the contributions come 2026. So now, not only do you have unfunded liabilities today, when that's not the case, that is actually going to compound, in my opinion, and you'll see unfunded liabilities absolutely explode when the contributions no longer meet the expectations of the actual expenditures.
Okay, so I know this is up in the comments. What is an unfunded liability?
So an unfunded liability is like a debt obligation. So you've got money coming in, but you have money that you've already set. And it's the delta between the money you have and the money you actually owe. So think about it this way. If you think about what Ontario said, if it used the same formula that Alberta did to determine how much money Alberta is entitled to get out, to take with it, if it started its own Alberta pension plan, it would take 60% they said. And then we said we are entitled to 53. Well, that's already over 100%.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? So where's the rest of the money? That's these unfunded liabilities. So they are basically the delta here is the fact that we are relying on future generations to pay retirees today.
So what's the total value of the fund?
The fund right now currently sits at about 576 billion with a B.
576 billion. And there's 1.14 trillion in unfunded liabilities.
Yes.
Okay, so let's imagine that the CPP was just something that anybody could invest in of their own will, and it wasn't forced by the government. As a investment manager, would you recommend people to invest in that fund?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So if you take a look at, run some of your own numbers. If you took what the government takes from you, mandatory by force, let's say your employer and your employee contribution, that works out to be about $626 a month. If you invested that, even at a modest 5% for your 40 working years, you would have about $1.2 million at the end of the day. And if you were to then, by say, I want to plan to the age of 85, I don't think I'm going to live past 85. So I just want to keep my investments, pay myself an honest monthly income. That's about $8,000 a month. The maximum right now today that you are getting, because it is not a pension plan. It is not your pension plan. It is a government benefit. It's a fixed amount set by the government of $1,307.
That seems actually a little bit pathetic to me. But yet I do hear people saying, don't touch my pension plan. I love this pension plan. It seems to me as though the facts do not support continuing in the Canada pension plan. The facts seem to me to support doing something better. And the bar is very low here, apparently. I think we could do better very easily. So it occurs to me that I don't think it's facts that people are basing these "don't touch my pension plan" on. I think it might be more of a feeling. So what are we going to do about that? Like, people are emotionally attached to this Canada pension plan, it seems.
Yeah, and it's hard because I read an article the other day that said it's actually the younger population in Alberta that supports the transition to an Alberta pension plan, and it is more the seniors that are afraid of losing what they already have. So as if you understand behavior and cognitive dissonance, I mean, change is very difficult for people. Even if the benefit is greater, most people are more motivated by fear, right? So they don't want to lose what they already have. Better the devil they know than the devil they don't. And that becomes the biggest hurdle, I think, for us to overcome. But the only way to truly overcome that is to assure individuals that your pension is not at risk by moving to an Alberta pension plan. In fact, there is greater risk, especially for future generations, not to the people who are already drawing on their pension plan. Sure, if you're, 75 and you're already getting your CPP, you're going to continue to get your CPP. As a matter of fact, by moving to an Alberta pension plan, you could potentially actually see better benefits. And what you're doing is ensuring for your children and your grandchildren a better financially secure pension plan under an Alberta pension plan. So you have no risk. And what you've done is created an opportunity to leave something better behind.
So in the proposal that the Alberta government is putting out regarding an Alberta pension plan, is there any kind of a guarantee in there that nobody's pensions will be reduced or removed? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so absolutely. So in the Canada Pension Plan Act, it says that any province can withdraw with giving notice. But one of the conditions is that the pension plan that will replace the Canada Pension Plan, so in this case, an Alberta pension plan, must be better or same benefits. So there is no risk to anybody that they will receive a lower payment or no payment. It has to be the same or better. And if you look at the demographics and you look at the economics and you look at the immigration, which are the primary drivers of the stability around a Canada pension plan, Alberta outperforms Canada on all fronts. So by moving to an Alberta pension plan, economically, we are far more stable and far more productive. Canada is one of the worst performing for the next 3 decades, according to OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Development that assesses all the global economies around the world. And immigration, obviously, we have people moving to this province, and demographically, we are a younger demographic. So we actually have more people working and contributing, and nowhere near the number of people that are retired to rely on the contributions. So on those three fronts, Alberta, bar none, outperforms Canada and would provide greater security to a pension plan than staying with the Canada pension plan.
So let's have a little hypothetical situation here. Say Stephen Guilbeault, Justin Trudeau, and Greta Thunberg are successful in destroying Alberta's economy, destroying our energy industry, and our young, vibrant workers who have their whole life ahead of them of contributing to a pension plan, they disappear, and all of a sudden, Alberta's in a position where, hey, we're not this have province anymore. How would that affect our pension plan? Like, is there a way to structure this in such a way that the fund could actually sustain itself and pay for itself without that huge younger demographic?
The demographics are what they are. I mean, at some point down the road, they may shift or change, but they're not going to change within the next, 2.5 to 3 decades. So for 2.5 to 3 decades, we have a younger population where the contributions far exceed the demands on benefits. The key here is, if you look at what Canada, what the federal government is currently doing, and they're not just doing it to Alberta, although Alberta gets hurt more than most, but you look at the announcement that Guilbeault made today, municipalities, he's not encouraging and not providing any more funding for the development of roads. Financial Post actually wrote an article, I think it was yesterday or today as well, that came out. I just did a video on that, talking about the population trap and how there is no chance for the next generation to improve their standard of living. How's that when you're 25 years old to have, a group of economists and an article that comes out that says, yeah, due to the mass amount of immigration that's come into the country and all the resources that it takes and all the savings being used to maintain current capital labor ratios, that there is no way for you to improve your lot in life.
Geez. Well, that does touch on another thing, and immigration is a jurisdiction of the provinces. And I really think if we allow the federal government to control the way our immigration works in this province, none of that's going to get any better anytime soon. So I believe when Alberta pulls out of the Canada Pension Plan, we also pull out X amount of dollars that, according to the current calculation, we are entitled to. Now, let's just use a round number of $300 billion. I think the number is like 343 plus maybe another 20 billion or something. However, let's use 300 billion. In the case of an Alberta pension plan, I believe that the people of Alberta get to decide in what way that amount of money is either managed or dispersed, what the province does with it. If we took a good portion of it and started the fund with that, how much of a head start or a jump start would that be to a sustainable pension plan?
And that's a really great question. And that's a number that I'm trying to find an answer to right now. That's a lot of actuarial data to kind of say if we started, and I would even start lower than that. I would start so Trevor Tomes, for example, did a report, University of Calgary, professor of economics, did a report, and he had a slightly different interpretation as to how the number would be determined for the assets that transferred to Alberta. And his number, though, even still, was 120 to 160 or 150, I think, $billion. AIMCO currently manages $164 billion. So this is not an insignificant amount of money. But in reality, if you take a look at the risks associated with the Canada Pension Plan, and you take a look at the surplus, if you can trust the LifeWorks number of that 334 billion, there is a $5 billion surplus in the first year. That's just the savings from withdrawing from the Canada Pension Plan and starting our own Alberta pension plan. That money can be invested. So even if we started at zero, because the reality is we should not necessarily be waiting on the federal government here to give us a number. guaranteed that number is going to have to be debated, negotiated, and it'll probably end up in the courts. I don't necessarily want to wait 3, 4, 5 years to find out what that number is and then go to referendum. Ideally, let's have a referendum. Let's make the decision based upon facts. And the fact is, we do not need anything from the federal government to start. Our population in Alberta, 65% working. So we have a 36% of the population that money then gets invested. Whereas Canada as a whole, only 5% is invested as a surplus, because all of the money is being used, that's being collected, is being used to finance and subsidize the other provinces and their retirees.
So the Canada Pension Plan started in the 60s, I believe, correct?
1966.
Okay, so in 1966, did the federal government and or the provinces inject X amount of dollars to start the pension plan so that it could be sustained? Aha! So here's my point. For those that are watching, the Canada Pension Plan is a pay-as-you-go plan. So we pay a bunch of premiums and then people withdraw the premiums almost immediately. The huge difference, if we pull out of that current system and take even a portion of what the math suggests that Alberta is entitled to, we start with a sustainable, not a pay-as-you-go Ponzi scheme, but an actual investment account that's being managed properly by Albertans. And we would have a say in that because we, as Albertans, we can change our government here, but unfortunately, we can't change the federal government. So this starts with a nest egg instead of relying on the demographic.
Yes. So you touched on two really good points there, is the fact that it's far easier for Albertans to influence an Alberta government than it is a federal centralized government. So that's key. And then the other one you mentioned is population, because Alberta is going to start with 120 let's say at a minimum, $120 billion. And realistically, we have a working population of 2.25 million people. Right now, Alberta is the primary contributor, supporting 21 million.
Wow.
If you look at the Canadian number.
That's pretty wild. So let me throw this out there. As an investment manager, let's say, I'm going to give you $160 billion. And I want you to manage that fund, and I want to know what the return is. What's a modest return on $160 billion?
Well, everything should be around a benchmark. So, Canada Pension Plan has been boasting, a 9.6% annualized return. And the projections moving forward in the chief actuarial report are averaging about 6% with no down years, no corrections, which is a dangerous assumption in my opinion as well. But with all that set aside, comparing apples to apples, what you want to do is I would enlist the actual experts who manage each and every asset class. So instead of bringing in-house salaried employees, which sometimes, that asset class is performing, sometimes it's not, I would actually look to outsource more of that, preferably, because it's much easier to outsource somebody who is doing excellent work, and that's all that they do. So, for example, you can't be the expert in all things, right? I mean, that's just logical. So why would you even try? I would go find the asset manager who's doing the absolute best, has a good track record, a good history and somebody who's been outperforming the benchmark. And so what's happening now inside the Canada Pension Plan, for example, if you look at the real estate manager, he's getting paid millions of dollars and he's underperformed his benchmark. So why are we paying somebody millions of dollars to not do as well as what the average, put it in an index fund could do?
That's a really, really good point. So if Alberta was responsible for deciding how that fund is managed, we could have that fund managed by people who are paid on the performance of the fund. So the better they do with our fund, the more money they get paid, and it gives them an incentive to do well.
And this comes down to governance, and it comes down to an investment policy. So Albertans have basically a blank sheet of paper where they can actually identify what those investment policy statements should look like, how much risk they want to take with this money, and where they want to direct it. So, for example, AIMCO has a different policy statement than the Canada Pension Plan. Quebec, for example, has a different policy statement as well. They focus a little bit more on internal and stimulating economic growth within Quebec. That's something Alberta could decide to do, or it could just say, you know what, we are going to do exactly based upon, sound investment policies and principles based upon risk mitigation and returns only. So, but then it needs to be independent from political interference, which the CPP is not independent from political interference. It is independent from a day-to-day operations. Nobody tells the management team what to buy or what to sell from a perspective of the actual investment, but they still have to answer to Parliament and other government policies such as ESG and DEI and climate change.
Interesting. So is it fair to say that Albertans could say our pension investment fund will not invest in any companies that undermine Alberta's sovereignty or try and attack our industry or do things that are to the detriment of our province? Could we do that?
Absolutely, we can. So you wouldn't necessarily frame it in that way, but I'm a big advocate of Albertans should not be participating in their own demise. And if you opened up the CBPIB, which is the investment board that manages the Canada Pension Plan, up until last year, they had welcome to a carbon neutral Canada, not a carbon neutral world, but a carbon neutral Canada. They were still heavily investing in Chinese coal. They were still heavily investing in oil and gas in other parts of the world. They just weren't doing it in Alberta.
Wow. That's so we create the economic conditions to exploit our resources and get them to market and be prosperous. And then we fund these things, and the fund turns around and tries to kneecap the very thing that's contributing to the fund.
Absolutely. And the federal government is very anti-Alberta, very anti-oil and gas.
They really
it's
are.
very much pushing the agenda. So what's happened, instead of having an investment committee, what we have now are political activists.
Yes.
And that's what has to stop, right? I mean, this should be an investment committee based around sound investment policies, sound investment returns, looking at returns and risk. It shouldn't be pushing a political agenda, which is exactly what it's been doing for years now.
So maybe we were talking about the feelings associated with this. Maybe people should try and digest the fact that their future, their investment, their pension is being jeopardized by playing political games and pursuing a fairy tale DEI agenda. So the people that are saying, don't touch my pension plan, leave my pension alone, maybe they should look and see where that pension plan or where that money is being invested. Like, even not even talking about the fact that we don't get what we put in it, but that seems like a really risky game to play political posturing with an investment fund.
Absolutely. In my opinion, this whole activism that we've seen on the political front, just fostering these ideologies around climate change policy, green technology, it puts an excess of pressure on investment committees to have to find these types of investments. And then I think you're trying to make excuses in some respects to justify investing this way by a more obvious investment where, the return is more obvious, the risks are less, and they're probably better known. So, in my opinion, climate activism and diversity, I want the most competent person to run my money, to manage my money. I don't care whether you're blue, black, purple, pink, green, yellow, what religion you are. What I care about is, do you have the necessary skills and do you have the proven track record to manage my money as effectively to my best interest? I mean, and that's called fiduciary duty. So do you want somebody who's going to have a fiduciary duty, who has a responsibility and is accountable only to you to act in your best interest? Or do you want somebody who's going to play the political game and have to, adhere to political influence and activism and make compromise as to how your dollars are invested.
That it's a little bit frightening when you think about this. We're compelled by law to contribute to the Canada Pension Plan, and we really have no say as to where that money goes. We're actually it is a form of taxation without representation.
Yes.
And even worse, that money can be used and is used, because I've seen some of the places it's invested in too. And some of the companies that are invested in have very strong ties to organizations like the World Economic Forum, who really don't seem to like Alberta very much. And it just blows my mind that people aren't or haven't been up in arms about this before now. This is one of the reasons specifically why Stephen Harper included the Alberta Pension Plan in the firewall letter, was because he knew that if Alberta was going to insulate itself against the external attacks coming from the global elitists, we would have to manage these things our own, so we could decide where our money goes and what it supports. So I'm really, really happy that we're finally starting to see a glimmer of light to start ticking off the boxes of those 5 things. So where do we go from here? I mean, in this conversation, it seems pretty cut and dry. The facts are the facts. Math doesn't lie, and we really have a lot of statistical and historical evidence as to why we shouldn't continue with the CPP. What do we do now?
So I think the first step is to make sure that we actually do force the referendum. So my concern now is that, a backroom deal is met and there's political, activism that's going to occur, in which case, it'll be, well, it doesn't seem to be a lot of public support. And so we're just going to drop the idea entirely, or we're going to completely wait until the Minister of Finance, who is a member of the World Economic Forum, where she's a director, she sits on their board. And then in addition to that, she is the one who is personally responsible for appointing the board of directors for the CPPIB. So he who does the hiring obviously has political influence and carries weight, right? So for me, it's about forcing the referendum. So we are looking to acquire a 200,000 signatures via petition to put on the UCP's desk to say, whether you're for or against, I don't care. At this stage, it's just about, let's have the referendum. And then second to that will be a matter of, once we have the referendum, it's going to be our job to make sure that we inform people to make an informed decision based upon fact, not emotion, not fear. And there is a lot of fear mongering going on right now with the NDP, telling people they're going to lose their pension, that the government can steal it. That's not true. I mean, and that's a simple fact. That is not a truthful statement. And I wish there was accountability for MLAs and for government parties that make statements like that. The problem is there isn't.
There isn't. And it seems like, I watched the NDP put ads on the radio during the election saying that if we elected a UCP government, they're going to sell our hospitals and fire all our nurses and doctors, and we're going to have to pay to go see the doctor. I thought, that's the most ridiculous claim I've ever heard, but the radio allowed it. There was no accountability, no nothing for them doing that. And the problem is people believe it because maybe they have already have a bias against conservatism. Maybe they already have a bias against the UCP. So they're willing to believe those things. So I think we have a lot of work to do, but I am kind of excited and I'm hopeful because the Alberta Prosperity Project has brought on people like you, Nadine, and Tanner Naday, and Corey Morgan, and I'll be even at a couple of these events to tell Albertans these things and help get them involved so that we can share this information with our friends. Because I think that's the key here, is that this isn't going to be done by the government. The government is suggesting that we look at this, and now the ball's in our court. So the people have to get involved, and we have to do the groundwork so that when the time comes, we can do it. So thank you for agreeing to share this information with us and attend the pension plan tour. I'm really excited for it. Do you want to maybe mention something about what that's going to look like, what people can expect, and how they can get involved to help do this and get it done?
Yeah, so we have a website. It's albertafirstpension.ca, and we will be posting all of our tour dates and locations to that website. Like you said, we do have a variety of speakers. I've also been interviewing a number of different individuals. So for me, it's not just about taking talking points and then regurgitating them. So, I'm looking for people that are extremely credentialed. So for example, I had an interview today with a gentleman, Fergus Hodgson. He's got his master's in finance. He's got a BA in political science and a BA in economics. And he's just published a book of which he's talking about, Alberta in particular, achieving sovereignty. But more importantly, he does have a whole chapter in there dedicated to the Alberta pension plan. And so it's about taking people who are in the industry, who have firsthand experience, knowledge, who know what this could look like, and who also know where to look for the pitfalls with the CPP, for example, that can speak to it and give you examples that are relevant to you. So for example, one of the things I always tell to people, would you support a pension plan? So if you were Quebec and Quebec pension plan says, you know what, that's it, we're not going to support any more hydroelectric power, we're shutting it all down. Do you think the Quebec people would support that? Of course they wouldn't. But yet here we are as Albertans, and that's exactly what the Canada Pension Plan is doing to us. So, again, let's not partake in our own demise. Let's get the facts, let's get the information, get out to a town hall meeting, ask your question. There is no reason to leave one of these town hall meetings without having all of your questions answered. And every piece of information that I have provided, I've actually given out data and reference reports and articles and statistics, demographics that people can go look up for themselves. And so that's the key part is, know where to look, know what questions to ask, get the answers, and then make an informed decision. So albertafirstpension.ca, but you can also go to, I think Alberta Prosperity has a list of events. Take Back Alberta has a list of events. We have a number of the freedom groups and other interested groups that are promoting this, whether they're political or not. They just understand the importance of creating some distance between Alberta and a centralized federal government right now.
What about our friends and neighbors in other provinces? If we're entitled to 50%, that means somebody's going without. What about them? What happens to them?
Yeah, there is a reason Chrystia Freeland did call a meeting of the ministers of the provinces very quickly, and that's because it exposes the follies and the vulnerabilities of the Canada Pension Plan. In my opinion, it's not very sustainable now with Alberta, propping it up. Imagine if Alberta leaves. So there is no province that is going to offer us support. Maybe Quebec, because Quebec has its own pension plan. It never joined. So it's probably the only province I could see that would offer any kind of support, because it'd be kind of hypocritical for it not to. But every other province in Canada is going to resist this and encourage Albertans to stay. And I think that's just a fact.
So the federal government has a vested interest in the Canada Pension Plan remaining the way it is, because if we start to shake this up, it's going to expose that they really, really dropped the ball on this. And the secure future that our seniors are thinking they have doesn't actually exist. So let's look at this in a dollars and cents kind of way. Do you know what the numbers are for what the net recipients of the CPP premiums, how much of their premiums would go up? Because I know that's a question. Like, is someone in PEI, is their pension premiums going to go, they're going to double? Are they going to get half as much when they retire? How's that work?
Well, so withdrawing the number, that LifeWorks did actually do a quick number on this. And they did say that the contribution rate would increase to 10.51%, I do believe. Don't quote me on that. I would have to look that number up. Meanwhile, Alberta's would decrease to like 5.91%.
And what's the current
same benefit?
What's the current?
So the current is 9.9, and that's going up though this year because now we have a supplementary secondary contribution that's being made, right? So again, that's another nice way of saying it's not sustainable. So now this is the problem. Now we're increasing the amount that's being taxed, and we're applying another fee on top of a larger income now, which again is going to inadvertently affect Albertans more than it is going to affect other residents in other provinces.
So our neighbors may see premium increases in the range of like 1 to 2% kind of thing.
I think in the short
Maybe.
term, they'll see increases to that number. I think in the long term, I don't really see a viable option. They just don't have the productivity, right? They would need to encourage more productivity and more income generation, more contribution. So there's only one way to fix the problem, and that's to either, well, there's a few ways: decrease the number of people that are drawing on it, the benefits, or you can increase the contribution rate, or you can increase the number of people that are contributing. So this is where the federal government has been doing this mass immigration, thinking that they can just increase the numbers, but that's a quality game. It shouldn't be a quantity game. We should be bringing people in with high incomes who are bringing their families, but not necessarily their extended families, who are now a draw upon government services like OAS and GIS and healthcare and education. So there's a whole other, area there that needs to be explored, and the problems are not obvious to people, and that becomes the bigger issue.
I like that you said that, obvious. So I just want to remind folks, if Canada actually, pardon me, let's say if Alberta takes control of immigration and we start focusing on bringing people in who want to move here to have a better future, who can contribute, who, they're professional, whatever, that also allows us the opportunity to bring refugees in who need a place to stay because they're unsafe. If we focus on making sure that our province is sustainable, we can help more people. That's just the reality. But you used the word obvious. I really think that when Alberta pulls out of the Canada Pension Plan, this will be the reality slapping the other provinces in the face who are allowing their pension plan to be managed in the manner that it is. They're looking at a 1.5% or 2% increase. It's not sustainable. The numbers are horrible. They're pathetic. Why are they allowing investments to be made based on the DEI garbage? That's not to their benefit, but they're allowing it right now because some other province is taking up the slack, and we're kind of enabling that type of investment and that type of poor fiscal management. So it becomes very obvious when you pull the Band-Aid off that there is a wound there and it needs to be fixed. So I think that's something that this country needs as a whole.
Well, for me, it's about economic output. What? Provinces like Newfoundland and Labrador, for example, it's rich in natural resources, but they do not have to develop them. Why? Because they're getting handouts from Alberta.
Yeah.
Right. And so this would actually force each and every province to take stock and to take a look at, how it improves its own lot. Right. Without the dependency of Alberta as the economic engine propping up the rest of Canada. And it just, this is the obvious part, right? Then it becomes obvious to all the provinces and to people living in those provinces, like, oh, wow, okay, we really need to do something about this. So they need the push, and it's going to be that push that allows them to then say, to the federal government, thank you. Your policies about, EVs is very nice and not very practical, and we've entertained it, but you know what? We can't afford this kind of nonsense to go on. Why? Because we now have to take care of our own.
Quebec, Newfoundland, Labrador, they sit on massive, massive natural gas reserves, like to rival our own. And the only reason why they're not exploiting them is because, well, Quebec has decided that fracking is bad. Developing natural resources is bad. So instead, we're going to accept $12 billion of equalization money from Alberta and the rest of Canada, and we're going to give $5 daycare because we can, right? They don't have to do the things that we do because we do it. And it's same with the Atlantic provinces. The same with the Maritimes. Like, they allow the federal government to do these things because they get a little bit of a pittance here and there. Maybe they get an extra seat in the parliament, or they get a little bit of a stipend here, like a free heat pump. But the reality is, if they spoke up and said, no, we're not paying a carbon tax, we're not paying a tax on the air we exhale, we're not going to follow your bonehead green agenda, we're going to be prosperous, they could be prosperous. So I think it's incredibly important that those provinces that can, namely Alberta, British Columbia, maybe Saskatchewan, start taking control of these things and force the rest of the provinces to take a really good look in the mirror and ask themselves why they're allowing the federal government to take this country down that path. When we do that, we could actually, these small steps, they have the potential to save the country.
Yeah, Alberta can be the model, right? It's one province that can do things right, and this is where provinces should be competing with one another, because this is how you get to best practices, right? Through friendly competition and cooperation, but again, competition, right? We should be exploring different technologies, different ways of doing things, and then modeling what works. And if you have a monoculture, you're not going to get that. But here's the thing, I mean, you don't see, so Quebec is very happy to take from Alberta. But, here's the reality. And here's a question for people to think about. You don't see Quebec banging on the federal government's door saying, we want into the Canada Pension Plan.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Quebec knows that the Constitution was written the way it was for a reason. It's because we have cultural and regional differences. We do things a little bit differently across all of these provinces. And we need to be allowed to make our own decisions and chart our own course forward if we're going to get along, right? Right now, there's this friction between the East and the West in this country because we get railroaded all the time. And I know what that feels like. So does Carrier. We literally got hit by a train. The rest of the Eastern provinces, they kind of dictate our futures, and it doesn't feel very good. And it ends up in a situation where we're over-contributing to the pension plan by $3 billion a year. We're a net contributor to equalization and the amount of around $33 billion a year, something like $700 billion to date, while policies are being enacted that reduce our prosperity and make our quality of life lower, make it more difficult to be an Albertan. And it's time we stand up and we say enough is enough. And I really, truly believe that these steps that we're taking to take back our sovereignty are a compassionate response to what we see going on in this country. Because at some point, someone has to be willing to stand up, say enough is enough, stick their neck out, take the persecution, and get this stuff done so we can get this country back on track.
I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of information. Obviously, when we do these town halls, we have 2 full hours to present the information, the data, the facts. But then we also have a full hour dedicated to answering questions from the audience. So exactly what's on your mind, exactly what's most important to you. Those are the questions that we can then provide answers to. And so thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And I encourage everybody, whether you're for or against, come out and listen and ask your questions, get the facts, and then just make an informed decision.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you, spending your time with us to do this. And I appreciate that you want to stand up and do something for this province. And we all appreciate it. So folks out there watching, if you want to help us out, please become a member of the Alberta Prosperity Project. We don't necessarily want your $20 or $30 or $40 for a 3-year membership. We actually need it because it costs money to do things. It costs money to advertise. In addition, when you become a member, you become part of this amazing organization that actually wants to contribute to the prosperity of this province, no matter what we have to do, and we will do that. So please join the project. Please consider donating so that we can continue to do these educational campaigns, attend events wherever you can, volunteer if you can. This is not a situation where 1 or 2 people are going to get this done. This is a situation where the people really need to come together and unite towards prosperity and freedom in this province so we can set a good example for the rest of the folks in this beautiful country. Well, Carrie always leaves with the best still photos of me. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to get through these questions as quickly as I can. I really enjoyed doing that video with Nadine. She's really super knowledgeable on these things. And if you want more information or you have more questions, go to one of the events. Please go, and you can just put your hand up and ask the question, and she will answer it. Or Tanner or Corey or one of us will get it done. So let's go through these questions, and then I'm going to close up with a very big ask from all of you fine folks. Okay, where are our questions? Let's find some question marks. And thank you to Max, who's been working in the back, getting some of the questions tagged so that I can answer them now. Okay, this is an excellent question from Mr. Heath. What are the big unions in Alberta getting from the federal government or their federal counterparts that makes them so afraid of Alberta upsetting the federal pension cart? Excellent question. Here's the thing. The majority of the unions in Alberta, and actually across the country, are very, very socialist. They're very heavily influenced by the NDP and the Liberals. In Alberta, actually in every province, the NDP government, there is no provincial NDP. It's all federal NDP. They just have provincial arms of the party. Okay, so everything that the provincial NDP does in an individual province, it kind of has to satisfy the federal NDP because that's their boss. Jagmeet Singh is their boss. So when you ask what the big unions are getting from the federal government, it's not even necessarily from the federal government. Let's just look at Alberta. In Alberta, the union bosses are very strong NDP advocates, as you can see. I mean, the Alberta Teachers Association, the Alberta Federation of Labor, they are both heavily influenced by the NDP. As a matter of fact, I've seen emails come across my desk from both those organizations saying things like, you better vote NDP, otherwise you won't get your raise, right? So another thing you'll notice is that the union bosses all have, not all of them, many of them have seats on the provincial board of the NDP. They get money, they get power, they get a position for advocating for a certain political party. So if you ask yourself, well, why is it that the NDP is so against an Alberta pension plan that, as the math suggests, is obviously in Alberta's best interest? It is not because they have the best interest of Alberta in mind. It's because they have their best interests in mind in their political aspirations, and they want the position. So they toe the line, and they mobilize their unions to vote in a particular way so that they give power to those that are going to scratch their back. Very simple. It's kind of genius, but also disgusting. And if we know about it, we can put a stop to it. Michelle asks, why are we not live on the Alberta Prosperity Project Facebook page? I'm not sure why that happened. It is selected in the StreamYard streams. We will look into it and get that fixed next week. In addition, if you missed the webinars or you just came in at the end, you can always go back and find them online. Carrie does a fantastic job of making sure they're posted to Rumble and YouTube and BitChute and all those things. So they are available. Next question. Yeah, here's one. This isn't a question, it's a statement, and it's very true. CPP is a joke. Yes, it is. I'm single, and if I die tomorrow, all that is paid out is $1,000 death payment. And that is true. And why is that? It's because the CPP is not an investment fund. It is not a mutual fund. It's not an RSP, that type of thing. The money isn't actually there. It's there, and then it's paid out right away. It's a pay-as-you-go type system. So there really aren't any benefits because you haven't actually accumulated anything. You've just been paying other people's premiums. Here's a question from Kathy Richardson. Is it true that the current government has taken money from CPP and given it to other countries and supposedly has invested in Chinese real estate? Yes, that is absolutely true. The CPP invests a portion of the money that the fund manages. So you heard Nadine mention, and we showed the screenshot of the report detailing it. The CPP has $1.14 trillion of unfunded liabilities. That means that if they had to pay out everything that's owed today, they would be short by $1.14 trillion. That is mind-boggling to me. It's absolutely ridiculously scary. And if you're a pensioner, how could you be okay with that? How could you be okay knowing that your fund that your pension comes out of owes twice as much as what the fund holds in assets? So yes, the CPP can invest wherever they want. And they posted something like, I think Nadine said, a 9.6% return, which is actually not too terribly bad. But the problem is, it's not that they're investing, $100 billion and making a return on it. They're investing a very, very small portion of the fund because the majority of the fund gets recycled back into payments immediately and isn't available as an asset to invest. Next question. Actually, here's a statement that I put up earlier. For those of you who mentioned we don't trust the provincial government with our pension, I've heard that lots. I have a tremendous bombshell for you that I will discuss after Nadine has finished her presentation. And I will discuss that after we're done with the questions. And please, folks, continue to put up questions if you have them. I'll get to them as soon as I can. This isn't a question, but a statement, and I hear this more and more every day because of the work that you folks are doing in supporting what the Alberta Prosperity Project and other groups are doing. Len says, as a senior, I'm all for APP. I'm hoping that you mean Alberta Prosperity Project and the Alberta Pension Plan, but you know what? I'll take either. More questions. Sorry, I'm just getting to them. Here we go. From my friend Maria Wall. So what happens when people, let's say from Southern Ontario, move to Alberta just before the age of 65 just to get a bigger check? Well, I'm not 100% sure on this, and I will make sure that there's something posted at the Alberta Prosperity Project webpage in the frequently asked questions to answer Maria's question. The question is, so what happens when people move from another place to Alberta just before 65 to get a bigger check? In my opinion, they would not get a bigger check. So the Alberta Pension Plan would be based on what your contributions are. I'm assuming that it would be based on your place of residency at the time that we withdraw our funds from the CPP, and then it would be calculated on that type of basis. But the thing to remember here is if you contribute to a pension, that pension is yours. If you contribute to the CPP and you move to France, you continue to get your CPP. If you contribute to an Alberta Pension Plan and you move to Quebec, you would get your Alberta Pension Plan. That's the way it works. It's your pension, and you get it no matter where you live. So while it would be very unlikely that you would be able to move to Alberta when you're 64 just to get a maximum Alberta pension benefit because you haven't contributed, your pension would follow you wherever you go. So I hope that answers that for you, Maria. Len again. As a senior collecting pension, if I were to make an online income, would there be any clawbacks like there are with OAS and CPP? That is an absolutely excellent question, and it brings up a very disturbing reality. If you are receiving your pension through the Canada Pension Plan, which you contribute to, it's actually your money. The government mandates that you must pay 9% of your income into the pension plan, and then you get it back when you retire. Well, they claw it back if you continue to earn money and be prosperous. So is that money actually yours? Is the pension actually yours? I would argue no, it's not. If it were your pension or your RSP and you were withdrawing for retirement, nobody would be touching it if you made more money. That's not the way it's supposed to work. And as somebody who's become very aware of the plight that our seniors and pensioners are facing with the cost of living increases we've seen, just knowing that if they go out and earn some money, that the government has the gall to deduct it from the money that they have been forced to save through a government savings plan, that's disgusting. Yeah, let's go to the next question. Again, Mr. Heath. Nadine has said, is an unfunded liability. Why don't we simply just allow those who are currently paying into the CPP be the only ones eligible to vote? With the guarantee was already mentioned that those dependent on this payment will be better off. Here's the thing. I am a strong advocate for the government just doing it. Like, we do not need a referendum for this. This is not a constitutional thing. The government can, by a piece of legislation, simply withdraw from the pension plan and have an Alberta pension plan. And that's what I would have liked to see, because I know it's the right thing to do. I've seen the math. Math doesn't lie. It's easy to determine. Well, it's not super complicated to determine what this would look like for Alberta. And if we did it now, within 4 years, we would be seeing the fruits of that decision, which is better pensions, less contributions, and a better managed thing because it would be managed by Albertans. However, the Premier, Danielle Smith, is very adamant that she will not act as a tyrant like her predecessor did. So while I believe it is the right thing to do for the government to simply say we're doing this because they can, we elected them to do these things through democracy, she doesn't want to do that. She wants the input of Albertans, which is admirable. So that's why it's not being done right now. The Premier has put this on us to do the work and make sure that people are educated as the benefits of the pension plan, and then we can have our say. And here is a response that I posted to somebody saying we need the referendum now. This is what I responded. We must educate Albertans as to the benefits of an Alberta pension plan before the referendum. People must know what to vote for. We need your help to do this. Please consider donating to our project, becoming a member, and volunteering. So let me just leave that. Here's my big ask. Over the last 2 years, things have improved markedly in this province, and we're still a long way from being where we need to be. As things improve, people are less likely to get involved in any kind of political activism, in advocacy. They stop donating to things. They stop becoming members of things because things seem better. They feel better. I mean, we can go and have a coffee now without showing our papers, so things are all right, right? Wrong. They're not. They're not better. They're better, but they are certainly not good, and they're certainly not all the way on a path to prosperity. We need your help. It seems to me from the comments here that people are very happy with the information that we're bringing out there. That's what the Alberta Prosperity Project is. That's what we do. We are an educational organization with the goal of creating or ensuring a free and prosperous Alberta. The Alberta Pension Plan is one of those things, and that's why we're talking about it, because we know it is one step of many that Alberta must take in order to insulate itself not only from the attacks of the global elite, but our own federal government. We need your help. We need you to become members. We need you to volunteer and help with door knocking campaigns, help with these educational campaigns. We need you to organize in your area and bring people together so we can deliver these messages. And yes, we need you to donate as well. This isn't free. The software alone, like as the CEO of this project, I see the bills, and I had no idea what it costs to run and maintain an organization like this, even with 99% volunteer work. It is very expensive. We need billboard campaigns. We need radio ads. We need mail out campaigns, door knocking campaigns. We need all of those things, and it all costs money. We need your help. So if you want to see these things succeed, vote with your wallet. Help us do this work. I give you my word that we will work our asses off to make sure that every man, woman, and child in this province knows what the benefit of this pension plan is. And then we're not done there. We will make sure that every man, woman, and child in this province knows what the benefit of an Alberta Provincial Police Force is. Then we will do the same thing with Alberta immigration. We will do the same thing with the Alberta Revenue Agency. We will do the same thing with Alberta Employment Insurance. And we will do the same thing with Alberta independence should those 5 things fail to ensure we're sovereign and prosperous going forward. We will not stop. And just because things have gotten a little bit better does not mean that we're done. We're not going to be done until we're fully insulated from these threats. So we need you. If you like these things, become a member, donate, and volunteer. And like I said before, we have a means by which we can get you a tax receipt for your donation. So, it's always nice to keep money in your pocket while helping a good cause. So there's my big ask. Back to the questions. Where are they? There's the link to join the project. And it's also in the comments, so you can copy and paste it. Here's another question from Mr. Heath. Very engaged, Mr. Heath. I appreciate that. Are the people of Quebec more intelligent and capable than Albertans? No. They're just more Quebec first. Albertans, they are somewhat Alberta first, Albertan first, but not like Quebec is, because Quebec had already established their culture and their identity even before Confederation, long before Confederation. Alberta has just recently kind of moved into adulthood. And so it's not that the people in Quebec are more intelligent. It's just they're farther along than we are. And I will point out that even when Confederation occurred, when our founding fathers wrote the original Constitution of this country, it was well received that the provinces needed to be sovereign in almost every area, and that we would not have a national government. We would not be a federation. Confederation literally means against federation. Canada is founded on the principle of being against a federated, centralized government. Canada was founded on the principle of the provinces being sovereign. That's why the Constitution is written the way it is. So we need to get back to basics and take that stuff so that we can function the way we were intended to. Now, we could debate on whether or not that will be successful and whether or not we need to be independent. However, the conversation right up until that point is exactly the same. We need to take back sovereignty in all of those areas and do everything we can to exist as the original Constitution and our current Constitution intended us to within Confederation. Next question. Sorry, I got to scroll through lots of comments to get to the question, so just bear with me. I'll get to them. Where are we? They're coming. I promise. There's more. Here's an interesting comment. The only way the division will end is if we get rid of our federal government and all provinces become independent. That may be true. I would argue that it is important that each province take back their sovereign jurisdiction in all areas and tell the federal government to get their fingers out of it, and then we give that a go first, right? I believe that an independent Alberta is the only way, but I could be wrong. The steps up to there are exactly the same. Take back those 5 things which we can control right now, and then work on the rest going forward. But you're right. The division would end if the federal government would quit interfering and allow us to exist the way we were intended to. There's a reason why there's no country in the world as big as Canada. It's because when you have a region that vast and that many differing cultures and identities and things like that, you have to agree to disagree and let people exist on their own terms. That's the only way to get along. If you try and start forcing everybody into the same cookie cutter shape, it doesn't work. And that's why we're supposed to be a confederation. Sandra makes a very good comment. She says, I'm guessing that if Alberta pulls out of the CPP, every other province has to take a serious look at doing the exact same thing. Maybe it's time to take a closer look at this whole matter of the benefits of confederation. I think the feds are pretty worried about that. They absolutely are. You know, we're literally pulling the plug on their endless trough of tax dollars, and they don't like that. But you know what? I don't like funding an endless trough of tax dollars, especially when those tax dollars are used to attack me, my province, and my way of life. Where are we? Man, there's a lot of questions. So did you folks know that about the pension plan, that it isn't an investment? Only a small portion is invested. The majority is just a kind of a pass-through, as in you pay a CPP premium and it goes out to someone else. That should worry anybody who is on the fence about an Alberta pension plan. I mean, that should worry them about staying in a Canada pension plan. I think there was 3 more questions. Here's a good comment from Maryland. The threat of secession garnered Quebec a lot of clout. A nation within a nation. It absolutely did. What Quebec has done is definitely something Alberta needs to do. We need to stand up for ourselves and say, no, we're not going down that anti-prosperous path, that anti-human path. We're going to stand on our own 2 feet as the Constitution allows. And you know what? Bugger off. How's that sound, federal government? Great question, Tammy. How can people be confident info provided on behalf of the Alberta pension plan is accurate to what government would say? So I will point out that the reason we're having this conversation about the Alberta pension plan is because when Stephen Harper penned the firewall letter about how Alberta could insulate itself from attacks from the federal government and ensure that we're prosperous, the pension plan was one of those things. So we elected a Conservative government in this province with a mandate to explore those 5 things that Stephen Harper mentioned. The pension plan is one of them. So the Alberta government commissioned a report by a third-party group, which, by the way, has some very serious and strong liberal party people in it. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing. I'm pointing out that this isn't just conservative asking a bunch of conservatives to go and do this report. This was a wide. It's the firm LifeWorks that did the report is arm's length from the government. They did this report. The information came from a third-party consulting firm, not from the Alberta government. So the best thing you can do is read the LifeWorks report. We'll get the link posted up in the comments, and you can just go and check it out for yourself. The other thing you can do is attend the town halls. Attend the Alberta Prosperity Project Alberta Pension Plan Tour. Attend the town halls that our MLAs are putting on to talk about these things. Hell, even attend the NDP town halls and challenge them on the things they're saying about the pension plan. You should be doing that. You should be listening to both sides. When you do that and you read the actual report and you start digging in a little bit into the meat and potatoes of the legislation, it's very easy to see who's telling the truth and who's lying. And I can tell you that the ones that are saying that if you don't vote for them, your hospitals will be sold and you'll have to pay for healthcare, those are the ones who are lying. Michelle, I love this question. Why is it up to us/you to educate Albertans and not provincial government on pros and cons of APP? That is a very good question. I spent the majority of my adult life relying on politicians to do the work for me, to save me. I'm done with that. Absolutely done. We cannot rely on politicians. Politicians, they blow whichever way the wind blows. And to be fair, if they don't get elected. They don't have a job. So what do? How do we make sure politicians do the right thing? Well, we become the wind. We become the parade that the politicians want to get in front of. Ralph Klein said that. He said, you know what? I don't create the parade. I just find one and get in front of it. And that's what politicians do. They're not the ones that create the movement. They just identify the movement and get in front of it because they know they'll get voted in if they do that. So we have to become that movement. We have to do the work. We have to stop sitting on our laurels and watching the world turn around us. We have to become civically engaged. This country, less than 2% or 3% of people are members in a political party. We say that we're the most democratic country on earth, and all we do is check a box every 4 years. What kind of BS is that? That's not democracy. That's the illusion of democracy. 3% of people are members in political parties. Political parties, they vote on the policy that they're going to bring into government. They vote on proposed legislation that's going to become law. And we sit at home watching Seinfeld instead of being involved in that, instead of donating 2 or 3 hours a week of our time to make sure our futures are prosperous. We have to stop doing that. It has always been up to us and not the government to make sure these things go well. We saw that all too clear over the last 4 years. So Michelle, when you ask why is it up to us, I say we have the blessing that it is up to us. Not why me. This is not a why me thing. This is a what can we do thing. So thank you very much for that question. And I think there's only 2 more. When will this referendum happen? Michelle asks. I believe tentatively it's scheduled for 2025. Now, I could be wrong on that. You can find the information on the Alberta government website. There is a link there that explains why we're looking at a pension plan, why Albertans are looking at a pension plan, why it's to our benefit, and then it's got a timeline for getting this done. So please just go check that out, and you can find that information. So that's on the Alberta government website. Christina asks, will Trudeau step down? Probably not. Narcissists don't step down. He'll just pretend that he was perfect and the best thing that ever happened to Canada, since his father with the National Energy program that also kneecapped Alberta because it was becoming the center of power of Canada. But that's another conversation. Michelle, excellent question. How would an Alberta pension plan be any different than an in-out pension plan? Number one, in 1967, when CPP was formed, it wasn't started with a nest egg. It was specifically an in-out plan. Now, for anybody who knows anything about investments, that's not sustainable. The difference with the Alberta pension plan is we would be withdrawing, according to legislation, according to a mathematical calculation that is really not open to interpretation. It's literally math. It is a universal language. We would be withdrawing X amount of dollars. Now, LifeWorks pegs that number at $333 or $343 billion. Oh my goodness, Chris, what are you talking about? That's like over 50% of the fund. And what's your point? If I invested in a mutual fund and I said to my investment manager, hey, I want to withdraw what I've invested, and they said, well, if you withdraw your money, then the other people that have that need to withdraw, it's not available for them. We have $1.14 trillion in unfunded liabilities. I would say, that's not my freaking problem. That's my investment, and I want it back. So show me my money. When you start with a nest egg like that, you can invest it and you can earn interest on it and you can sustain a pension plan in that way. So that's how this would be different. There's another really important thing to mention here as well. I did see a comment. I saw a couple comments about we don't trust the provincial government to manage our pension plan. Well, you know what? I don't trust any government to manage my pension plan. As a matter of fact, I believe that we should not be forced by law to give any portion of our paycheck to any government for any reason. I believe that we should be allowed to make those decisions for ourselves. I should be allowed to take 10% of my income and invest it in whatever the hell I want for my retirement. But that's not where we are. We live in a country where it's actually in the Constitution that we will have pensions. So we have a pension. Who's going to manage it better? The federal government or the provincial government? There's no right answer there. That's the wrong question. The question is, which government can we influence in order to make sure that our pensions are managed the way we want them to be? As an Albertan, can you elect a member of parliament to go to parliament and change the way CPP is managed through an act of parliament? No, you cannot. What do you mean? It's a democracy, right? Yes, it is a democracy, but our voice isn't loud enough. Albertans, along with British Columbians and Saskatchewanites, even if we all voted the same way and all elected MPs that went to Parliament and tried to fix this, we could not because we don't have the votes. Plain and simple. So right now, we are taxed by the federal government, and we do not have adequate representation to determine where those tax dollars go, taxes or pension or whatever. If our provincial government manages our pension plan, as the Constitution allows, by the way, for a reason, we can influence our governments provincially. If we don't like what our provincial government is doing, we will punt them, right? If we don't like what our political parties are doing, we will get involved at the CA level and we will show up in numbers and we will either change the leadership or change policy or whatever. But my point is, on a provincial level, we can influence these things. If you don't like how your pension plan is being managed, you get enough people, you bring them with you, you put forth a policy, and we get it done. We can't do that federally. So if you don't trust the provincial government with your pension plan, that is every reason why you should be advocating for an Alberta pension plan instead of a Canada pension plan. Because you as an Albertan, your voice matters, and your voice can change things in this province, as we've seen over the last 4 years. Next question. Good statement from Ernie. Ask any accountant what they think about CPP. Yeah, from the time I was, 15 years old, I've been hearing about we probably wouldn't have a CPP when I was ready to retire because it's not sustainable. It wasn't sustainable then, it's not sustainable now, and we need out so that we can protect our pension, our pensioners, and our prosperity. Rhonda, this is a great question. So what would happen to the equalization payment? Could Alberta stop making those payments? Yes, with the constitutional change. Is it going to happen? No. The only way we can stop making equalization payments is if we have a referendum on independence in this province. The reason for that is there is no other leverage that Alberta could possibly use to influence any constitutional change on equalization or any other constitutional issue except for a referendum on independence. The Clarity Act states a successful referendum on secession would lead to a negotiation with the federal government, which may lead to secession. That also means it may not. What that means is it opens up negotiations so that we can fix the problems within Confederation that ail us. So the Alberta Pension Plan will not influence equalization payments. If we want to do that, there's other things we need to do. And for more information on that, please visit www.albertaprosperityproject.com, and we have all the answers for that. The Alberta Prosperity Project is the only organization that has a clear plan to a clear goal and an obvious solution for each and every one of these problems. No other organization has it. We're the only one. So check it out. I think maybe there was more than 3 questions. Oh, Johnny Freedom, this is a great statement. The fringe freedom fighters need to get their act together and stop demonizing based on anything vapid, inconsequential, and useless big picture. We have millions of military-age men pouring over our borders. US 20 million so far, and per capita Canada is higher at 4 million and growing. This is not normal. It is not normal. Perhaps Alberta should take control of immigration as well to make sure that we can sustain our province and help those in need in the form of refugees immigrating in the future. Almost to the end. Here's information right there, folks. AlbertaPensionPlan.ca. LifeWorks report is right here at open.alberta.ca/publication/app-analysis-lifeworks-report. How does this affect seniors? Well, perhaps with a effectively managed Alberta pension plan, seniors wouldn't have to choose between paying for their heat or their groceries. I'd say that would be a pretty positive outcome. Yes, Sandra, I just provided it. The LifeWorks report can be found here. Connie says, so the answer is to stand up provincially. Yes, the answer almost every time is to stand up for what you believe in and use your voice. Even if you believe that you're the only sane person in the room. Principles are important, and we should stop ignoring them based on the status quo. Oh, this is an interesting question. Cindy asks, what if referendum on an Alberta pension plan was successful, but before it was transitioned, the NDPs got in? Could they turn it around? I don't think so. I think once a province has a referendum on a particular issue, well, okay, let's just say, for instance, that they did turn it around. If 60 or 70 or 90 or 95% of Albertans said we want an Alberta pension plan, the NDP was elected, please no, and they said we're going to reverse this pension plan. Well, 95% of the people in the province would not like that. So what do you think would happen? Well, there would be no parade for them, and they would be removed from power very, very quickly. Probably with Albertans lighting a prairie fire, the likes of which has never been seen before, and removing every MLA from every constituency across the province. So it is very unlikely that, number one, it's going to be very unlikely that the NDP get in. Number two, it would be very unlikely that they would cast aside a referendum with a clear answer and go against the wishes of Albertans, in my opinion. And this is a great comment. I love this one. Comment was made, other provinces would not support this. Would their CPP crumble if Alberta pulled out federally? So in speaking with Nadine and Tanner Naday on this very question, it is unlikely that CPP would crumble. However, it would expose the federal government to the mismanagement that the CPP has been, that's been happening with the CPP. So like Nadine said, it's likely that, for instance, Prince Edward Island, their premiums would go up from, say, 9.9% to 10.9%, which is about a 10% increase, right? So it's not a huge number, but people will feel it. So it's not that it would crumble, but it would make things a little bit more difficult for them, and they would be certainly asking some questions. And probably the biggest question would be is, where's our money? Why is there $1.14 trillion in unfunded liabilities? As a matter of fact, why is everybody not concerned that there's $1.14 trillion in unfunded liabilities on the books of the Canada Pension Plan? I think it's time that the other provinces got involved in this right now. I think every single province should take back their pension plan. They should do it themselves because they can direct how it's run. It would be better that way. And get the federal government out of our business. Who do you think would look after the pension plan? My friend Wayne asks this. Well, I'm not going to say who I think would look after it, but I will tell you that one of the points in the Alberta government's presentation as to implementing an Alberta pension plan is that Albertans get to decide how our pension plan is managed. We get to decide if we use a current firm like the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, which we could. We could use AIMCO, which, I mean, they manage big sums of money, but I think the performance has been less than stellar. We could have the government manage it, but how many of us trust the government to manage our pension plan? Or we could set up a completely new management firm to do it, an Alberta Pension Plan Board. It would be our choice, and that's the point here. It's not who's going to look after the pension plan, but who are we going to ask to look after the pension plan? Albertans get to decide. That's the key here. Thanks, Wayne. And in closing, Daniel asks, how much is our national debt? It is more than $1 and less than 10 trillion. It's a lot. And it's gone up considerably over the last few years. Incredibly, when another Trudeau was in office, it's almost like history is repeating itself. But I think that this time we need to do something differently that's never been done before. Alberta needs to stand up. We need to claim our birthright, and we need to set an example for every other province in this confederation as to how we can continue to be prosperous and pursue human flourishing at all costs. We need to do this. We must do this. And we need your help. I asked you before. I'll ask you again. Please become a member. Please donate if you can. As a matter of fact, you can set up a recurring monthly donation. And that money, no, it doesn't pay for a Lamborghini for me. I drive a 2008 Jeep Grand Cherokee that's in the shop broken down right now. I live in a modest house. I don't take a paycheck from APP. Nobody really takes a paycheck for APP, save some professional fees and some software stuff. We do this largely on a volunteer basis. That money is needed for these campaigns. We need to rent venues. We need to cover the expenses of the speakers. We need to provide juice and coffee, those types of things. And we can't do it without you. So if you want this to happen, please help us make it happen. And we will work tirelessly to get that done. So with that said, I'm going to sign off, and I will say thank you, folks, for joining us week after week for these webinars. I really appreciate it. Hopefully someday one of you will take over this for me so that I can go back to doing what I do best, which is making hamburgers and pouring coffee and making cinnamon buns, which I will be doing tomorrow morning at the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. Best cinnamon buns, best hamburgers, and really the best food in Central Alberta. Please please come and join us there for a meal. There's my shameless plug for my own business. But you know what? I got to eat too. So have a great evening, everybody. Thank you for being Albertans. Thank you for those of you who are about to become future Albertans. You will not regret it. Stay prosperous, my friend.